The NBA is known for paying out contracts worth millions of dollars and making its players rich. But sometimes these players get caught up in the big-time lifestyle of playing professional sports and still end up running out of money when their playing days are over. This surprising phenomenon is more common than you might think, and in this video, we'll look at the NBA players that have gone bankrupt. Before we get into the video, make sure you subscribe to our channel and press the notification bell to make sure you don't miss a single video. Antoine Walker. We might as well start off this list with one of the NBA players that is most famous for losing his fortune. When you hear about these kinds of things, Walker is often one of the first players brought up, and that's for good reason. He's one of the biggest examples of a player that made quite a lot of money during his career, but ended up losing it all due to spending excessively after his playing days were already over. Walker started his career in high school in Chicago, where he was a teammate with future NFL quarterback Donovan McNabb, before getting the attention of the University of Kentucky, where he would start on the 1996 championship-winning team. From there, he was drafted in the top 10 and would have a career that saw him play from 1996 to 2008 with a number of different teams. Surely a player that had been drafted this high and played for this long would be secure when it came to money, right? Well, in the case of Walker, that ended up being wrong. He underwent Chapter 7 bankruptcy in 2010 and was made to list 4 pieces of real estate, including one Miami home that had a list price in the millions. Walker would even have to sell off his championship ring to help recover financially. Surprisingly, this all came after Walker had made over $108 million from salaries during his NBA career. That amount might have been enough for any normal person to live off of, but it wasn't enough for someone with an extravagant athlete's lifestyle such as Walker. As soon as he ended up in the league, Walker started a way of life that involved a lot of purchases that weren't quite necessary. While plenty of NBA players collect cars, Walker's collection was over the top compared to most of the other players in the league, and he had little moderation when it came to making a new purchase, such as a $400,000 car. If he just stuck to one thing, he might not have had the same fate following his career. But it wasn't just cars. Clothes, jewelry, and real estate were other things that became frequent expenses for Walker's bank account. And a gambling problem didn't help him either. In fact, the year after his career ended, Walker was arrested in South Lake Tahoe because of $800,000 in gambling debts. In 2010, he was put on probation and would have to work to repay $770,000 in gambling losses to Caesars Palace, as well as 2 other casinos in Las Vegas. These days, however, Walker has turned around from his troubled course. He's begun to help educate younger athletes about managing their money and not ending up in the same position, as well as being careful with whom they trust when it comes to investments and ventures in business. In interviews, he explains how most players come from backgrounds like himself, without much wealth, and enter the league without knowing much about managing money. These days, Walker has put his attention towards teaching these players the dangers of big spending, bad investments, and not listening to better financial advice. Latrell Sprewell. Another one of the more famous names out of the NBA players to go bankrupt is Latrell Sprewell. Like Walker, he actually earned quite a bit of money during his career, to the tune of $97 million in savings by the time he walked away from the game. He had been a first-round draft pick and played for a good amount of time, between 1992 and 2005. During that span, he was a 4-time All-Star and was on the All-NBA first team in 1994. Despite all of that, Sprewell would ultimately become more famous today for how his career ended and what happened after it. Specifically, Sprewell might have had a chance to avoid going broke if it wasn't for the infamous decision that he made towards the end of his career that would go on to make headlines and become one of the defining things of his career. He was with the Minnesota Timberwolves at the time, and as he was approaching free agency, Minnesota offered him a 3-year contract extension, which was worth $21 million. Sprewell, however, was insulted by how the offer was lower than his current deal and said that he couldn't take it because he had a family to feed. Sprewell, of course, had already played out a long NBA career to that point and had the earnings to match it. His family wasn't quite in danger of going hungry if Minnesota didn't give him a larger deal, and $21 million is still plenty of money. The remark made the news and went on to become very famously associated with Sprewell in his career. After turning down the deal, Sprewell wouldn't play another season in the NBA. That ended up not being a good decision for his future prospects, because he would no longer have the money to keep up living a lavish lifestyle. Not long after he had retired, his yacht was repossessed by federal marshals for failing to keep up with the payments. A home in Milwaukee owned by Sprewell would also enter foreclosure, and as of 2011, Sprewell owed the state of Wisconsin $3.5 million in unpaid income taxes. So what happened to Sprewell, and where is he today? Well, it appears he's still living in Milwaukee, but in a lot more modest conditions. His net worth has dropped significantly since his playing days to about $150,000, and he no longer lives the kind of lifestyle that he did in the past. Both his loose style of managing money and his on and off the court antics have been used as a warning for younger players in the NBA, because despite being on the All-Star team 4 times and the All-NBA first team once, Sprewell is more known at the end of the day for the way his career ended and some of the other incidents throughout his time in the league, such as choking his head coach. He received a 68-game suspension for that incident when he was with the Warriors, losing out on millions of dollars in the process. Dollars that, as his post-retirement life shows, he could have definitely used. Derrick Coleman. Derrick Coleman came into the NBA with big expectations. In fact, he was the #1 overall pick. The New Jersey Jets selected him over Gary Payton, who would become the more well-known and successful between the two, and was taken 1 pick later by the Supersonics. Coleman would make the All-Star game 1 time during his career, while Payton was an All-Star 9 times and was on the All-NBA first team twice. And when it came to his expectation to compete with some of the top power forwards in the league, injuries got in the way for Coleman and kept him fulfilling his potential at the position. At one point, Sports Illustrated even went as far to say that he could have been the best power forward ever, but because of the injuries, he only ended up playing well enough to make it to his next paycheck. Unfortunately, Coleman would also continue to have bad luck when it comes to off-the-court success, specifically with finances. He should have done pretty well after leaving the league due to having $91 million in career earnings, but that large sum didn't last as long as Coleman probably thought it would. The main cause for his money disappearing after his retirement in business ventures gone wrong, mainly in the Detroit area. Coleman had to file for bankruptcy in 2010 and owed millions of dollars to over 50 creditors. Unlike some of the other players that we've seen go bankrupt after leaving the NBA, Coleman seemed to have better intentions behind his spending than just living lavishly. He'd tried to help revive his home city of Detroit with his investments, but these investments just didn't become financially successful enough to keep him afloat. He told NBC Sports at one point that he was making the investments in the hope of trying to turn around a city in need of someone willing to make big moves there. He attempted investments even included in shopping malls called Coleman's Corner, which would have tried to revive one of the worst neighborhoods of the city. Despite losing out on most of the money from his playing days on these investments, however, Coleman is still active today in the community and notably drove over 60 miles every day to help deliver water to Flint, Michigan during the water crisis when clean water was unavailable. While his investments weren't successful, his efforts in the community did earn him popularity in the area. Allen Iverson. The most successful player on this list is Allen Iverson, but being successful in the league doesn't stop a player from going broke when he's outside of it, if he isn't careful with his money. And Iverson was one player that never got good with managing money until it was too late. Iverson had a number of things stack up to result in his financial problems rather than just one: an addiction to gambling, giving money to others that had come up with him, the usual big spending that comes with the NBA lifestyle, and also lawyers' fees and other payments associated with legal problems. Iverson became known as one of the best examples of athletes that had come from little and brought an entourage with them, spending big money on these friends at the expense of their long-term futures. The former Sixers star would even go as far as leaving his money in garbage cans within his mansion, bags that sometimes would end up missing. He was ordered by a judge in 2012 to pay $900,000 to the jeweler, but despite his former NBA fortune, he didn't have the funds to pay up. He revealed that he was spending far more than he was bringing in every month, and that most of it was going towards repaying various creditors. These days, though, Iverson's life is more stable than some of the other players that have ended up with financial problems after leaving the league. He's eligible to receive half of a $32 million trust fund from Reebok when he turns 55 in 2030, and is also eligible to start receiving NBA pension checks. Iverson won't be keeping up his old lifestyle anytime soon, but he does have a clear path to living a comfortable life.